Hello, everybody. I'm Ben.
Morning.
I never thought of attending FCM because I was actually going to be back east last year when it was still going to be live. And then, of course, COVID came and whatever. And so I was going to, while I was back east, I was going to take in some of it. I never thought I'd be doing it from home, from a treadmill, and a whole different program, that's for sure.
Cal, I think you're muted.
Yes, I was. So thank you. Yes, this lovely 2nd of June, 2021, I'd like to call the West Coast Committee meeting to order. And with that recognition of the new Chalmouth territories, and further, this is a time for mourning and implementation of truth and reconciliation, and a disclosure of the government and church records that relate to the death of children while in the care of residential schools. In particular, the recent discovery and location of the mass burial site containing the remains of 215 children on the property of the former residential school in Kamloops. It's very, very disheartening and upsetting, and I know everybody is feeling the same. Hopefully the government is going to step up to the plate and we'll get all of this information out in a timely manner. So yeah, thoughts and prayers go with the family members, obviously, and yeah, it's just a real shame. Anyway, as I mentioned, the recognition of the territories here are the new Chalmouth Nation and other Malnouth members as well. This meeting will be recorded and live streamed on YouTube to the regional district website. Item 2, approval of the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve, including any late items, requires 2/3 majority? All those in favor? Carried, thank you. Item 3 is the minutes, and item A is the West Coast Committee meeting of March 3rd, 2021. Are there any comments on any of the mini committee meeting minutes of March 3rd? Seeing none. I'd like to move that the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on March 3rd, 2021 be received. All those in favor? Thank you, carried. Item 4 is petitions, delegations, and presentations. We normally allow 10 minutes for your presentation. And if you're getting close, I'll put my hand up and I'll let you know. If there's something important to carry on, we can discuss it and get approval from the rest of the committee. The first item on the agenda is from Samantha Hackett, West Coast Multiplex Society, regarding the West Coast Multiplex Society status. And I know, Samantha, you're just going to chat about it and tell us what's new and what's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kel. Yes, just a bit of an update and touching base. I did want to first thank you so much, Kel, for acknowledging everything recently with the residential schools at the beginning, but I also did want to specifically just acknowledge the territories of Heshquit First Nations, Toloquit First Nations, Toquat Nation, Ahousaht, and Ucluelet in the spirit of truth, healing, and reconciliation. Those are the 5 communities that we're working with for this project, and so we wanted to thank and acknowledge them for their support in this. Also, thank you so much, all of you, for the opportunity to update you this morning. We actually haven't had the chance to officially update since 2019 with everything that's been going on the last little while. So thank you so much for this time. I'm Samantha Hackett. I'm the chair of the West Coast Multiplex Society. The West Coast Multiplex Society is a group of dedicated West Coast locals and all volunteers that over the last 2 decades have been giving so much of their blood, sweat, and tears, bringing a multiplex to reality. The West Coast communities, under the persistence and dedication of the West Coast Multiplex Society, in consultation, of course, with local governments, First Nations, and the ACRD, have been in pursuit of this shared recreation facility on the West Coast. And this, of course, for those of you, and you may all know all this information, but just as a bit of a background, this represents an exciting and very unique MOU between 5 First Nations communities and 3 non-First Nations communities. So Toloquit First Nations, Ahousaht First Nations, Heshquit First Nations, Ucluelet First Nations, Toquat First Nations, District of Defino, District of Ucluelet, and Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. The Society has and continues to work hard to ensure that this facility will incorporate the needs of all of us and our children here on the West Coast. And while the project, of course, remains to be built, from the feasibility study, business plan, we know that the development of this facility would add significantly to the overall health and wellness of all of the residents in the area. Prior to the successful referendum in 2012, the project was planned for a phase approach with a smaller initial investment followed by subsequent phases addressing a pool and potential other phases. Our recent education campaign that we actually have undertaken at the beginning of 2021, has been focused on the education around why an arena first, as this approach is necessary for the project to be successful, but a lot of misinformation out there. Following the completion of our additional geotechnical studies around the ACRD land, we did have confirmation, of course, years ago that the location for the proposed multiplex facility would be up along ACRD property along Airport Road on the right-hand side. And over the last 4 years, the Society has been working specifically with Toloquit First Nations to secure assistance to revise the business plan and capital cost estimates. That's on behalf of all 8 communities. Toloquit has also been instrumental in acquiring, I think in Doug's report, it outlined the $100,000 from the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, which was what we completed the updated business plan and design costing reports with for the arena portion of the multiplex. There was also, in that business plan, it identified the option of Toloquit First Nations actually managing the facility, which would be a great economic training and employment opportunity for TFN. And they really do continue to be instrumental in helping to secure the capital funding for phase 1, as they were the community that applied on behalf of the 8 communities for the Canada, British Columbia Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program grant that was applied for in 2019 and again in 2020. So again, just the phase 1 of the multiplex, just to reiterate, is the full-size arena. It's accommodating sports, recreation activities, celebrations, gatherings, events, including family and community events, festivals, arts and culture. It will be a public art space, carvings, different things like that, as well as a high ground emergency shelter. The building itself will be designed and built to allow for the addition of the future swimming pool and the potential additional phases. And this behind me is the rendering. I wish I was coming to you from this building live, but this is a rendering of the exterior. We believe that with all of this, if we work together as the 8 communities, that this much needed facility can become a reality for all of us and for our children and our future children. And once built, because we have the referendum in place, that covers the operating deficit up to, and it's about $760,000. Even though it is that amount, based on the business plan that we had done for the phase one, the deficit sort of worst case scenario was $350,000. That business plan was very conservative, not taking into account sponsorships, advertising, event revenue, and grants. And the Society has also been exploring multiple opportunities for funding. We've been having continued conversations with the BC Lottery Corporation, confirming they've confirmed that they're very interested in supplementing the operating costs up to $200,000 a year, with all 8 communities working together, which is really great. And they've been confirming that they did confirm that last year, most recently. We, of course, appreciate all the continued support from all of our West Coast communities, and specifically from this West Coast committee in 2018, specifically giving direction for the Society to explore capital funding opportunities. And then more recently from the ACRD supporting the capital funding grant with a resolution and letter of support, recognizing the importance of expanding recreation opportunities for the communities on the West Coast, and that was through a very tight timeline. So I don't think I've officially thanked you all for that support. With the land in place, the planning is completed. We're really in just a position to look at the capital funding. That's been our focus for the last year, and this is, specifically to improve those opportunities, especially for our youth in the region. Well, the grant sits with the provincial government right now. That's where we're continuing on the community outreach to get as much of the current and correct project information out to the public. We've had a very positive response with the Why an Arena First document through the 8 communities, and we'll have our second education document ready next week, which I was thinking, because we didn't have it ready for this meeting, that I would do a follow-up email just to show you all the documents that we've been putting out to the community, the education documents. This one is focusing on phase 1 arena, the actual impact on the West Coast property taxes, because that's definitely been a big conversation. And then concurrently, we've opened an endowment fund with the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust with focusing on the capital fundraising. We're finalizing a document currently for the outreach to more private funders. And then just this week, we've actually also started filming for a video to support our capital fundraising as well. So lots going on all at the same time for us. Another aspect of the project that is definitely more specific to the West Coast Committee and the ACRD is the aspect of diversifying the economy on the West Coast, fitting with all the great things that you're already doing supporting the airport lands. And I just wanted to sort of do an official, if there's anything that you ever need from us, or if there's anything that we can do to support, please let the Society, myself, anyone know. We're happy to support everything that's going on up along Airport Road. It's very exciting to see things happening up there. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for the time to update you all, for the ACRD's continued support, recognition of this enormous contribution to health, well-being, so many other benefits, and the eventual multifaceted facility that will be here on the West Coast. We look forward to assisting just in any promotion of this regional project, as it's a unique collaboration of the 8 communities for a single West Coast goal, which definitely carries substantial weight for the future of everyone in this region. So thank you so much, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Yeah, thanks for that, Samantha. Does anybody have any questions? I note that, Tom, please, go ahead.
Great, thank you through the chair. I just want to thank, right off the bat, thanks Samantha for, we've had great conversations lately, and it's really important to acknowledge the amount of work that Samantha specifically, but the Multiplex Society in general, the work that has been put in, involved in this is complex and full, and these are volunteers, by the way, that have been doing this, and the regional approach to bringing the recreational opportunities to the West Coast can't be underestimated, and as Samantha pointed out, not only for the youth, which is obviously for many of us one of the stronger components, but I think it is wide-reaching from all layers of our community. So I really do want to thank Samantha for the work that's been done there. One of the questions I have maybe for Samantha, and then I'll have a follow-up for staff, I think. One of the things that has come up recently at the District of Tofino in terms of capital costs for projects is with, as we know, the substantial increase fairly recently in building costs well, all over the country, but specifically in our region. And with the revised design and costing of the project, is there confidence in that moving forward? I know specifically with the asks for the higher levels of government in terms of those capital contributions, is there confidence in those design and costing reports, or should there be an opportunity to revisit those at this time, and only in the sense of looking to those higher levels of government for those contributions from a capital granting perspective? And I did want to also, and maybe I'll stop there and let you maybe respond to that, and then I have a follow-up.
Okay, great. No, and it's a good thing to bring up, because definitely the recent wood cost specifically has changed a lot of things for projects. Just a little bit of background on ours, and we do know the design costing report it's been a couple of years now, so we do know that there's definitely increases regardless of the wood cost. We when the design costing report was done, it was a Class C estimate, and unfortunately they couldn't get any more specific because of the size of the project. There's nothing comparable on the West Coast, and so they basically said that this was the closest that they could get. When we went to contractors specifically to look at the costs, 18 million was what the design costing report came in at. Any of the builders and developers on the West Coast, when we looked at, we would talk to specific electrical contractors. Each of the contractors specifically, we actually were able to bring the cost down about 2 million to about 16 million. Sorry, I'm just going to plug in my computer. So we're fairly confident that with that bit of buffer that we're going for 18 million for the first phase, but that we knew a couple of years ago we could do it for 16 or even less, that we've got a bit of wiggle room. The other thing is, and years ago there was that big wood opportunity that you could go after, you know, if your building was fully wood. I can't really remember the details, but we had looked into it, and it just didn't make sense for the location and the type of building that we were going after. And so the design costing report focused on two prefabricated options. So one's a pre-engineered and one's a sprung structure. Both of them actually really, like in the picture this way, the wood behind me is probably the only wood really in the structure itself. So we're not too worried about the wood specifically, but we do know, of course, every year that goes by, it gets more and more expensive just in general.
Great, thank you. Yeah, cost escalations where we understand are somewhat unpredictable, but we know what direction they generally go. So thank you, Samantha. And then I have a follow-up, and it might be partly the staff, the question directed towards staff. And you touched on the operating deficit, and of course that's the area for many of the contributors to that. And one of the questions that comes up regularly for me, of course, and you and an excellent job of bringing that forward in some of the educational material about what the actual costs to the residents in terms of their taxation contributions. And one of the and I do want to really applaud the work that the multiplex has done on looking at those alternative financing for those operating costs through granting and through a variety of other sources. So recognizing that there's active movement on the part of the multiplex to bring those costs down. One of the questions I have in terms of how the allocation of those, the proportional allocations happen, and one of the models that we looked at, and maybe this is where I need clarification from staff, is the proportions that are allocated from the district, the different contributors. One of the areas is often it's based on that property assessment value, and I know there's other models where that we've looked at too, is basing it on population and potentially property assessment values. And I'm wondering if that is the model that's being looked at those contributions, or maybe you could explain what the model is for looking at the contributions from those taxation requisitions. Potential taxation requisitions in the future.
Mr. Chair, the board adopted an establishment bylaw, a service establishing bylaw for the multiplex 8 or 9 years ago, something like that. And I would ask Terry to confirm, but I'm pretty sure it's based on converted land and improvements. Any change in that would require going through the legislative process related to changing a service establishing bylaw, which Wendy, in this particular case, I don't think just the participants could change something as substantial as this. So I'll ask Terry to comment on the apportionment and Wendy on the changing of the bylaw, if that was something that the board wanted to look into.
Yes, so the bylaw was created on an apportionment method of property values tax, so land and improvements. I think that we can actually change the apportionment method with consent of the areas at some point if we wanted to review that at some time, just like we're considering doing right now in the Regional Park Service. But when we established the bylaw, it was done on the basis of land and improvements.
Thank you. And maybe, I don't know if Wendy, were you going to jump in? Sorry to.
Oh, I was just going to echo what Terry said. There more than likely is the opportunity for the directors to consent, but we'd have to check legislation because there's a maximum amount that you can do under consent. So we'd have to confirm that.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. Are there any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thanks again, Samantha. Oh, Rochelle, sorry. You're moving around there so fast, I can't tell where you're at. Go ahead, Rochelle.
And then I hit the wrong button. I just wanted to thank Samantha. I feel as though I have been, I was a child looking forward to when the multiplex was starting, and now everybody knows because I'm not that young, but it has been going on forever. So I look forward to, yeah, thank you.
Thanks again, Samantha.
Thank you all.
Much appreciated. And we have further in the reports, we have the information that Douglas has put out on the West Coast Multiplex. Thank you for that. Next item is Mr. Ben Bolton, there you are, regarding the marine plastic debris reuse project. So go ahead, Ben.
Well, thank you for having me, everybody. My name is Ben Bolton. I have a background in civil engineering and have been guiding on the coast for the last 5 years. I just came off the coast. We were up in the north coast of BC doing a big marine debris project. We recovered 104 metric tons of plastics, and that has kind of become my life. And in the future, it seems to be becoming more and more my life. The project, we're going registering a new society under Wild Coast Plastic Solutions Society. It's our working name. And we will be implementing a marine plastic and consumer plastic reuse center out at the Tofino Airport on Lot 17. We are looking at dealing in end-of-life management for marine plastics and consumer plastics. So basically, the idea here is to find suitable reuses for marine plastics without too much fossil fuel implementation and input. So to start, we're starting small, and based on our requirements with the airport site, we cannot have any animal attractants. So we're working towards a mobile marine debris washing unit. So we've got a primary sorting facility down by the junction, and we're going to have this mobile marine debris washing unit and basically sorting as per our fund requirements. I'm working with Rugged Coast, CRS, Surfrider, and also the Small Ship Tourism Association on a variety of marine debris projects this summer. And basically, we will look at a few of the higher value plastics and look for technologies where we can create a value added product out of that. Something that recycling in BC is very limited at the moment. We're working with the Ocean Legacy Foundation as well. They have their facility out at the Tofino landfill, the West Coast landfill, but they seem to be at max capacity. So we're looking for a local solution to deal with marine plastics. It's going to be a recurring issue. We know that even some of the beaches that we cleaned last year, they've already got a few tons of trash on them already. So basically we're looking at a 3-phased plan. Phase 1, we're looking at June to October, and that is basically establishing the site. We're going to do some light grading on the site at the airport, and then have some temporary structures. We're going to put a 40-foot sea can and a 20-foot sea can, which we are looking for in-kind donation. And then that's basically to get started and we're going to have clean marine debris sorted on site. And then in October, we're going to start looking into a Quonset hut type structure. So based on I was speaking with Mark Fortune yesterday, and it sounds like there's a 2+ year servicing plan for hydro and for sewer. So what we're going to look at with this Quonset hut, pending board approval, pending district approval, building code, and everything around that, we are looking at implementing some solar and potentially some wind. Now that has to, of course, adhere to Transport Canada's aviation standards, being at the airport. So basically, construction, we're going to start in pending approval, pending geotech survey, and all the boxes are ticked sometime in the winter. And then we're looking at phase 3 to have a fully operational facility. And in that facility, we're looking at bringing a plastic chipper and shredder to process marine plastics as well as consumer plastics. And then we are looking at setting up a small materials lab. So it'll be a retrofitted 20-foot sea can where we have a clean facility to work with injection molds and work on different plastic molds and look at different useful consumer products. We're going to stay away from single-use consumer products. A lot of the stuff what we're looking at has applications in building materials. So we're looking at reinforcing concrete, doing polymer reinforced concrete. So with rope and line, water bottle strands. Again, we got to check with the BC building code because we're a little bit behind in our province in terms of alternative material uses. But then we're also looking at insulation applications as well as plastic exterior siding for houses. Now, for the consumer products, we are looking at taking recycled aquaculture foam and cutting them down into surfboard blanks, as well as boogie board blanks, and then shaping surfboards out of reused aquaculture foam. This brings us basically to our big fundraising kick and our fundraising campaign. Ideally, by the end of September, we will have an event, a call out to a whole bunch of shapers on the West Coast, and we're going to have a surfboard shaping competition and hopefully a fun event down on the West Coast. Again, pending COVID restrictions and what have you. I've been in touch with a few artists, and we're going to have a live art display as well as the artistic surfboard shaping competition. And then we've got a few brands that have decided that they would like to sponsor the event, as well as we're working in partnership with a few shapers and surf shops as well to bring a fun event and basically the kickoff of the society after a big summer of field operations. We're also looking at technology is there for quite a few different things regarding plastic reuse and low energy input recycling. So this is going to be part and parcel with a research and development facility. So we're going to be doing product testing and basically look at the strength profile of different plastics that have been photodegraded, that have been degraded by salt water. So we've got a lot of planning to do, but what we're looking at right now is the kickoff of our fundraising campaign. And we're looking into contacting a whole bunch of private foundations, as well as different parties that may be involved. DFO has in their budget some funding towards dealing with ghost fishing gear. So we're working together with them to try to figure out how we can process this ghost fishing gear according to environmental standards and what have you. I have just been in the field for the last month, so I'm just wading through a pile of emails. So apologies that I don't have a nice PowerPoint presentation, but in the coming weeks, I should have a lot more documents to send out. Any questions? I'm sure there are lots of questions, and be happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Well, thanks for that, Ben. Yeah, if there's any questions, I'm not seeing any. Oh, Tom, of course. Tom, just 1 second. Where are you planning on holding the kickoff, Ben? Whereabouts?
I'll be down at probably Wickeninish Beach, and then in Ucluelet. And I've been just trying to figure out location, and it's still pending. So we're gonna have the shaping competition regardless, but it's just whether or not we can have an in-person event. That's still pending COVID restrictions. I'm hopeful.
Yep, sounds good. It's a worthwhile project. Thank you for that. Tom, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Of course, I got something to say, right, Kel?
Of course.
Yeah, Ben, this is super exciting. My son is just going into the UVic civil engineering program, so maybe he'll get a job out of this down the road. But it's a very, very exciting project from many aspects, and I'm certainly happy to support the work moving forward. It is, as you say, it's fairly complex in terms of what you're looking at bringing forward, everything from research and development to bringing forward some products that I think will be useful in our common market. One of the questions that I have is in terms of the business model and the scalability of what you're proposing, because I think this is an excellent in terms of our economic diversification on the coast and the utilization of those airport lands. I'm just curious, I mean, I don't know enough about it, but in terms of your ability to scale this project to make it a viable business in a larger context, and is location, geographical location, a hindrance, or does it have the ability to allow you to be able to move this project forward because of potentially the lower costs of establishing out here in this region?
Thanks for your question, Tom. So the funding structure that I'm looking at for this organization is the non-for-profit society, starting up, on a lot of grant funding and private donor funding. But then I'm looking at a few different potential social enterprises that will become the funding cycle for the not-for-profit, basically the for-profit entity of the not-for-profit. So I'm looking at a few different business models with some other folks. I will not be able to take that on. I've probably gotten myself into quite a bit of work here. And that basically, that's what I see. Basically, first 2 years, we're going to be relying heavily on donations and grants. But after those 2 years, I'm trying to create this funding cycle with these products. So the first 2 years, we'll be looking at product testing and development. And then by that point, we should have a marketable product. And then we can set up these social enterprises to fund the organization and keep it going. A lot of societies you see in BC that I've seen, they start up great, they have this great funding kick, and then they just peter out. And that's not what I want here. This is something that is a long-term solution to plastics on our coast, a long-term solution to a long-term problem, something that's just going to keep bugging us for years and years if we don't deal with it. In terms of geographical hindrance, I think we are in a great place. This organization came out from basically having to truck all of our plastic over to Vancouver. So we've got truckloads and truckloads at extended cost, basically, to get 5 tons per truckload of debris across a ferry. We've got fuel to get to the Ocean Legacy facility. The idea here is to cut that cost and to also have a local material source, so we don't have to truck things over the pass. When we look at the building material aspect, a lot of folks that I know, and this year has been very difficult to find building materials. I've been working on a few projects, and it would be nice to have a local supply for different building materials. As far as we're looking at as well with the TFN Public Works Department, working with them to look at how we can 3D print mechanical components for the Public Works Department. Basically, anything breaks down, we can have a 3D printer, right? Plug it in, and we've got a part that doesn't have to be, we don't have to shut down production for their operations. And this can be applied to, I think, a lot of different industries as well out here. So I don't see the geographical location as a hindrance. No, I see it.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Ben. Tom?
Yeah, no, just great, Ben. I mean, one of the concerns with the nonprofit model, obviously, is that sustainable funding over the long term, which is the bane of many of those organizations. So I'm glad that you guys are thinking through that long term solution. Granting, sustainable granting is, I think, almost an oxymoron. In the sense that each year you apply for those granting, cross your fingers, and hopefully that funding comes through. So having a model that will be able to perpetuate what I see as a very valuable and innovative concept, I think, is an excellent idea moving forward. One of the things that I always hope to work towards is that we would potentially put you out of business by dealing with the upstream sources of those pollutants that come to the coast, and hopefully over the long period, that those upstream sources will hopefully diminish, but I hear what you're saying. We'll probably be dealing with this issue for many years to come. So thank you very much for the presentation, and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tom. That's the goal. I want to be out of business in 10 years, hopefully.
Thanks again. Much appreciated. Are there any other questions? Oh, seeing none. Thanks again, Ben. I appreciate it. Moving on.
Keep you posted on the updates. Bye.
Absolutely. Thank you. Moving on. Is there any correspondence? Are we seeing anything at all, Wendy?
No, Mr. Chair, there's no correspondence today or request for decisions, but we do have several reports.
Yeah, thanks for that. The first report in the West Coast Multiplex, are there any comments on that? I think it was pretty thoroughly done, and with Samantha's comments, it certainly helps a lot. Any comments on that? The RATI grant. No, is anybody going to be speaking to that? Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is just an update to the committee. There was a grant opportunity that came up from the Western Economic Diversification section. They recently announced new funding for Regional Air Transportation Initiative grant, and airport staff heard about this, and they worked very hard under a tight deadline to put an application in. So we just wanted to update the committee. We'll see if we're successful in that application. It'll be up to, I think, $300,000, and that'll go towards operational costs, which will allow us to offset basically some of our already anticipated budget amounts that we've assigned, and then we can look at addressing and sort of basically reallocating some of our original budget that we get from tax requisition, and then we can apply those to initiatives that will help us at the airport to increase passenger counts and work on basically our ultimate initiative with the Long Beach Airport, which is trying to get it more self-funding as much as possible as we move along. Tell me how well I'm doing here. Maybe I'm not going to be able to do that. Oh, can you hear me? Did I lose it completely?
We still hear you.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay. My screen is frozen now. So, oh wait, how's that? Can you see a PowerPoint presentation?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. This is magic. Okay. So we just completed the West Coast Landfill Annual Report for 2020, and we've got great news to report. I'm just going to go over the mission and targets of the landfill, our solid waste generation rates, our diversion, the capacity of the landfill, some of our finances, an overview of the environmental monitoring, and then talk a bit about the projects that we've completed in the last year and our upcoming initiatives. So the mission and target for the landfill is to protect human health and the environment and maximize the value of service by effectively managing the region's solid waste in an environmentally, socially, and economically responsible manner. We have 6 targets. The first one is to reduce our landfill disposal to less than 400 kilograms per capita. The second is to increase diversion of waste to 50%. And both of those are directly tied to our solid waste management plan. We have recently set a target for our airspace consumption of 600 kilograms per cubic meter. We have a financial target to have our annual capital contributions meet our funding requirements. For the leachate, we want to confirm that all of the leachate that leaves the site is treated to meet the criteria for freshwater aquatic life. And we want to make sure that our landfill gas generation is below a target of 1,000 tons of methane per year. So if we look at our first target for solid waste generation, we've got basically the last 5 years up here, and we've broken it down by residential, commercial, and construction and demolition waste. We used to have an other category that we've recently removed and sort of categorized it into either commercial construction or residential, but it used to be sort of fish totes and things that were mostly diverting now anyhow. As you can see from the graph, we had a drop in our commercial waste production in 2020, and that's directly related to the drop in tourism that happened because of COVID. We did see a bit of the residential pickup and a significant increase in the construction and demolition because a number of businesses chose to use the opportunity to do some renovations that they had been delaying. So overall, the waste production was down last year, but not as much as we had anticipated. We're still above 400 kilograms. We have reduced our consumption or our waste generation by about 5% to 562 kilograms per capita. Unfortunately, because we had COVID, I don't know if this is really a reflection of anything or as far as progress goes, because we do see an increase in the residential waste generation. So in 2020, at the end of 2021, we'll have a better look at this and see where that's going. However, it is a move in the right direction towards our target. But more importantly, I would say is that our diversion is doing much better. And especially on the West Coast, because we have so much tourism that we manage, this is a more reflective target of how well we're doing as far as really managing waste and trying to improve our recycling and organics composting. So in 2021, we saw a huge increase. So we went from on the side, it's on the right-hand side, we see our overall diversion target, and it's indicated by the line. So we're at about 13% in 2019, which is, we've made minor increases. And then we had a pretty big jump to 19% in 2020. And that's for a few reasons. One, you will see the stewardship programs were about the same, but the metal is increased significantly. And this happens a lot when you're trying to measure and monitor waste production. What actually happened is we changed the way that metal's collected on the West Coast as a whole. So there used to be collection bins in Poulet and Tofino that steel companies were collecting independently, and it wasn't getting measured, and basically the data wasn't collected. So in order to get better efficiencies, all of that material is now getting hauled to the landfill, and we've created this very large staging area. So when the metal collection company comes, they're able to use their metal and HIAB machine to sort of like stock the metal in. It's a more efficient way of moving those materials anyhow. And we're better able to measure data this way. So we've seen a significant increase in the amount of metal that we're diverting. The material that we collect through the Recycle BC program, so that's residential, paper, packaging, things like that, increased significantly. So we don't know if that's a result of more people shopping online, which we definitely saw, but we've seen a lot more of those materials coming into both the Curbside program as well as at the depots. And either way, that is good news because we're capturing it in the recycling program. We also added a few diversion streams. So mattresses were added in 2020 and the compost pilot. So we also see an increase in the yard waste and compost portion. That's quite noticeable on the graph, which is excellent. We've added commercial cardboard as a location at the landfill. There's also, again, commercial cardboard that is just, it misses the landfill. So that information isn't necessarily collected in here. So we know that the diversion rate is higher, but we just don't have a way to collect the information to measure it. Ocean plastics is definitely a new one that we've seen a number of initiatives to try and both get them out of the environment as well as keep them from being landfilled. And that is just fantastic news. So we are very happy to see this waste diversion rate increase. And I would say that Surfrider, Pacific Rim, who does our education program, has been doing a great job for us in that as well, and working with a lot of businesses to
basically individually audit their waste systems and then work with them to make changes to improve that. So we're happy to see that happening. As far as landfill capacity goes, we have about 712,000 cubic meters remaining in our landfill, and that equates to 40 years right now. So when we convert that space to years, we have to consider two things. One is the amount of space that garbage is going to take up. And so that can be how well we're compacting it, like how small can we make that garbage with our machines? And then also how much cover material we use to cover that. So as we compact more and use less cover material, then that improves our airspace consumption ratio. So we actually want to increase that and get as many kilograms as possible into a cubic meter. So we've increased that in the last year. We went up to about 560 kilograms. If you compare that to 2019, where we have just over 450, that's an incredible increase. So, you know, the operations staff working with ACRD staff have just made excellent improvements. We still have ways to go and we will continue to work towards that, but we want to celebrate when we do have those successes. The other thing that will increase our landfill capacity is the waste generation. So we talked about that, and we know that the big thing coming up is going to be organics diversion. So we hope to see about a 30% diversion from organics, up to 30%, and we'll continue to target that. That is also going to extend the life of the landfill, and that's good news for us financially as well as just as a community. So when we talk about finances, we need to put away a certain amount of money, and again, based on when we think the landfill is going to close and what we estimate the closure and post-closure costs are going to be, it gives us a number that we have to put in the bank to be responsible fiscally. We also have to put money away for any of our capital projects that we know are coming up on the books. So based on our old design and operations and closure plan, our minimum amount that we have to put away is $70,000 a year for closure and post-closure, and we're well above that at $120,000. However, we think that plan is old and needs revision, and we have so many changes coming up at the landfill. We're going to wait until we do some of the major upgrades, and then we're going to update that plan to get us some new updated numbers. But we are doing pretty good, and in 2020 put away a total of just over $300,000 into the reserves. Environmental monitoring, as the committee is aware, we struggle at the landfill with the rain. So the landfill itself obviously is possibly in the highest rainfall area of any landfill currently active, and the leachate collection and treatment system is not, it's just not able to process all of this material, all of the volume. And so we have overflow events. This is an ongoing issue, and we had 19 overflow events in 2020. Based on the monitoring, so staff conducts the monitoring, does field sampling quarterly, and those get sent to an accredited lab. And we have Pito and Associates who analyze that material and then provide us with an annual monitoring report. The report was too large to attach to the agenda, but it is up on our website and available to the public and to the committee if you wanted to look into the details. It's a very lengthy and in-depth report. What we're looking to do to address this issue is basically move forward with the preliminary design. As I'll talk about with the projects completed, last year we did the West Coast Economic Assessment, which decided, like, do we spend the money to upgrade the leachate system or do we close the landfill? And it makes much more sense for us to invest in this landfill and put in the upgraded treatment system. And so we're working on the preliminary design. I had hoped to take that to this committee meeting, but we don't quite have enough accurate details. So we will be coming back at the next meeting to discuss that further. And we have a target for landfill gas. So there's basically a threshold of 1,000 tons of methane per year when you have to install a gas collection system. And right now we have because relatively small with relatively small amounts of organics going into it. We estimate it's just over or just under 340 tons of methane produced annually. We're probably never going to have to, we don't anticipate over the life of the landfill to install a gas collection system. However, there is still methane getting produced, and once we implement organics diversion, that's going to reduce the production of methane, which is excellent for the environment. So if we do a summary of some of the projects, as I mentioned, we completed the West Coast Landfill Economic Assessment and also improved some of the monitoring program as recommendations that PITO had made last year. We started diverting mattresses, which are getting collected at the West Coast landfill and processed locally in Port Alberni. The compost pilot project was up and running for the year and has increased the volume that it's able to process. We updated the curbside collection contract at the beginning of 2020, and the waste reduction education program is really just enhanced this year, and we've seen the results of that. We also launched the recycling app, which is for the entire region, and anyone can go on. A little plug for this one. If you haven't downloaded the app, please do, because if you have any questions about how and where I can recycle X, it will tell you, and we can update that whenever there's a change. It also can remind you when your garbage and recycling collection days are, and eventually your organics collection day. So that's great news. The Bear Aware program, which has actually been running for a number of years, continued and continues to expand, which is excellent. And we've got a great picture there on the right-hand side of the Ocean Plastic Depot pilot program. So you can see some of the materials that are getting collected and hauled over to the mainland right now for recycling, and that is continuing to happen. So it's nice to see the diversified approach of how do we address all of these materials and keep them out of the environment and out of the landfill if we can. One of the big projects upcoming, as I mentioned, is the leachate treatment upgrades. So we are looking at doing basically an engineered wetland. So we already have one lagoon there, and so we'll have a collection lagoon and then another aerated lagoon with channels to enhance sort of the uptake of nutrients and contaminants in the water. A special nitrification pond, which is then going to go to the wetland section, like a wetland. It's an engineered wetland, which allows even more uptake of the contaminants that we measure in the leachate. So we're going to be managing this as well as with sort of stormwater diversion. So we're going to try to see if we can remove some of the water, clean rainwater that lands on the site that doesn't have to then go through the treatment. And we can balance our water model to see how much water we need to add to make sure that the system is always working, because there are times during the year when there isn't that much water falling out of the sky. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And with this project, we're going to have to talk about funding, which we will be able to do, but the funding mechanisms, as well as looking at our regulations, because this is going to require an update to our operational certificate. So there's quite a few big and moving components with addressing the leachate issue, but it is probably our highest priority besides organics diversion for the West Coast landfill. And when we talk about organics diversion, we have begun we've done a site visit and are doing some preliminary work on the design for the composting facility. So we'll be upgrading the tipping area as well as adding in a processing facility, which will be able to accept biosolids, but the majority of material going to the site is going to be from the Curbside food waste program. We're going to be continuing with the education program. We are updating the landfill contract to extend this a little while until we can go out for competition. We are going to be starting this fall with engagement with residents about the curbside collection program and looking at more diversion opportunities, potentially with construction waste, drywall. As we tackle more things, we see that there's more pieces of the pie that can be removed from getting landfill, which helps us with extending the life and just generally a good thing to do. And I want to acknowledge everyone who put so much effort into this. We have a fantastic working group that we met last week, and we meet with municipal staff as well as First Nations, and really it's amazing working on the West Coast with solid waste because everyone is so enthusiastic and the energy that's out there is phenomenal, and you can see some of these projects coming which are so innovative. And I just appreciate all of the effort that everyone puts into this, both from ACRD staff and just all of the member partners, which is fantastic. Okay. And I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen if I can.
That was great. Thanks, Jenny. Very in depth. And I noticed there, the last part, you had a picture of the bicycles there. The one with the white wheels and the pink rims, that was mine. Tom likes that, I know. Anyway, yeah, thanks for that. Any questions from anybody? Oh, everybody. Okay, let's go with Rochelle first.
Jenny, thanks for that. You produced a good document. Woo, woo, that's awesome. Two probably maybe silly questions. First one, I might not even want to know the answer to, but those 19 overflow incidents, do you have, like that chart 5 comparison with other places, do you have a comparison to if that happens in other places and how common that it would be? And then the second part would be, what are those effects or complications or concerns when something like that happens?
Excellent question. So through the chair, the one good news, the silver lining to the overflow events is that it is happening in the middle of winter when there's so much rainwater that what's happening is the lagoon pond that holds all of that water is essentially just rain. And so there's very little leachate in there because it's all rainwater. So the water that's then overflowing the pond, and instead of going through designed it to go through, it goes straight to the creek. The contaminant level is very, very low. It's mostly rainwater. However, it's not following the process and the treatment system that we've designed. Therefore, it is an overflow event and is not acceptable. So the whole point of having a system is that you design it, it needs to operate as such. And if it doesn't, you know, we did not design it. We're not designed to direct discharge to the creek at all. And so what happens is that instead of it going to the north, overland into the irrigated area, it basically bypasses that. I don't know, because I don't know the details of most landfills, but I would honestly suspect that it's a rare occurrence when you have an overflow event. And that is why this is something that we just must address, because the system should be operating as designed. And unfortunately, it just never anticipated the amount of water that we would be pushing through there.
Thanks for that. Michelle, your comments, and also Tom, go ahead, please.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it is very exciting. My wife tells me I missed my calling, and she said garbage was my calling. I said it's not garbage, it's opportunity. But nonetheless, it is an area of great interest to myself, and so I really appreciate it. And I think the report should go out broad and wide. It's great reading material. Anyways, I did have a couple of questions and comments, and one of them starts with the diversion, and which is really exciting, the amount of work that's being done there. And you put in as one of the targets was that 50% reduction, and I see all the ways that we're moving towards that. And I'm wondering, is there a target time associated with that target of 50%? I put down 2025, but that was just something that I thought might be ambitious. But I'm wondering if that is something in the planning. And I do have some follow-up questions.
Excellent question. So the 50% target was set as part of the solid waste management plan. And that originally was adopted, I think, in 2007, and then updated a few times. Our solid waste management plan is still valid, but should be updated shortly. The organics diversion is one of the big projects that's left on the to-do list. And so we're waiting to update the solid waste management plan until we have the organics diversion in place. I'll be talking a bit in the next report just on what our timeline is, but for phase 2, which is the West Coast, we'll be looking at 2022 construction, 2022. So 1 year from fall, we should be starting to divert. Once we've done that, then we want to redo our solid waste management plan, which is what sets the targets. So I don't believe that there was a date actually attached to that target, but when we do the solid waste management plan update again, it does make sense to make these time sensitive, because then it gives a little more credence to why you're putting resources towards certain things.
Great, thank you. Yeah, some of the diversion areas that you pointed out, and it was interesting, as we know in our tourism, in our tourism sector, as one of the big players. And so when we look at some of the areas that we might focus, and I see that we're already doing that, is those education programs that you talk so much about have been, I think, highly effective in general on the coast, but specifically in those sectors. And that I think that, you know, there was some in the financing, which I'll go into in a second, those operating costs increase. But one of the areas in that education, I think it has that long-term payoff, and that in fact, I don't see it as as a deficit per se, as that this is a long-term investment which is going to pay off in spades into the future, and we'll probably see that as we go through many years of looking at these financial reports. I did have a question on finances in terms of, you touched on it briefly in terms of those contributions to the reserve funds, and looking at, I know that we're going to have a new operating model. We're going to be bringing in some of the large projects such as Leachate, so that there will be, I think it is important, I just, as a director, to bring out that I think it is important that we look at what those optimal contribution levels are. And I know that Ms. Fong will be looking at that clearly, and that there may be opportunity within there once we have much more accurate figures coming forward. There may actually be areas where we can potentially relax contributions and small tax breaks on the requisition that's being asked for, because it was just noted that we are contributing at a much higher rate at this point, based on the information we have, and that later on we may be having a lot more comprehensive data for them to make those decisions on. So this is just something that I had noted that might be an opportunity for lowering of those requisitions coming into the future. And so that no real question there, other than it's certainly something that I'm very interested in having them look at moving forward. And then the last one was just on the leachate, and I'm glad to see that it is a #1 priority for yourself and your department, and that the continued discharge, of the freshwater aquatic life criteria that is met out is not acceptable. And I do understand. My father-in-law is a chemist, and he's often told me, Tom, the dilution is the solution to pollution, but we disagree on that. And so I do think it is important, like you say, that if we have a design that we want to ensure is giving to be in compliance, frankly, that we need to be, and that I think as a region, this is something that is really important, that we are upholding the values that many in this region support in terms of being environmentally and ecologically conscious. That's great. And then I was wondering if maybe Prince Rupert might have a higher volume than us. I don't want to be #1. I think that Prince Rupert hopefully was going to be #1, but I do really want to thank you for this work. It's incredible. We're moving, everything seems to be moving in a very positive direction. And I do want to point out your staff is a huge component of that. And as you say, the West Coast in general are very enthusiastic, and we can see by all the innovative projects, one of them coming again today to the table. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the future.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. Jenny, we're going to make a comment. Thank you.
Through the chair, I do want to make one note on the financials, because you raise an excellent point. If we can extend the life of the landfill, the result is that we then stretch out the amount of time that we need to pay for that closure and post-closure. However, unfortunately, I wasn't able to bring the report on the leachate upgrade plan. So that was not part of the original financial modeling that they did. When they said it was $70,000 a year, that was with the existing leachate system. And we know that that new leachate system, in order to treat the leachate as it goes out, is looking at about $2.4 million. So that's a new unexpected capital cost that's going to sit there. The organics project, although is grant funded, it's excellent. We do have to put financing away for its renewal and replacement. So I think that we want to wait until we actually have all the information on the table to do the new financial model. And I think that's partly also why we have been choosing to put away 120 instead of 70, is that we'd rather be more conservative, considering all of the unknowns and all of the new large capital projects that we know are coming, until we have a chance to do the model and come up with the accurate number to know what it is. And so there's no harm in putting more away than less.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, when I was looking at the figures, I didn't incorporate that thinking into my process. I didn't realize. Well, I guess I did realize that that large capital project. But the other part that, and I think you touched on also, was the fact that if we can extend that life, like I was looking at, I think you did the math already. If we look at an 80-year time frame for closure, we're looking at much less of a contribution as opposed to that 50-year contribution level. That being said, the work that you're doing is naturally going through the airspace, or all of those things are going to I'm confident, make those numbers come down just through the operating efficiencies that you guys are so diligently working on. So thank you once again.
Thanks for that, Tom. Well, I still have you, Jenny. I see the next item is the West Coast Curbside 3-stream waste services update. And that should be, oh, wait a minute, Tom, hold on there, buddy. Let Jenny talk and then we can get into it. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we wanted to update the committee as well on the organics project and how we're doing with organics diversion. Some of the board members will know that we are getting close to completing phase 1, which is the city of Port Alberni. They're going to be rolling out Curbside 3-stream as of September, just beginning of September. So we are now starting to plan for, well, we've been planning, we're working very hard on phase 2, which is the West Coast. So we're beginning design. We've met with Tetra Tech and they're starting to get design ready, and we're hoping to have that construction done by, over the majority will be done in the summer of 2022, which means that the facility will be ready to accept materials by fall. So then we will need to have the bins and carts with the community and residents starting in the fall of 2022 and implement that with engagement. So we're looking to set up a working group similar to what we have in Port Alberni. So we have the city, which is doing the big collection portion, and the ACRD, and we have a working group that's really been tackling this huge project. And last week, as part of our just our waste group that we work with all of our partners, we've put the word out and asked, like, who wants to be a partner in our basically our West Coast Organics Diversion working group. And so we're setting that up. We're hoping to start doing engagement with residents starting in the fall, this fall. So September, shortly after we do the rollout here, then Jody, who's the organics coordinator, her efforts are going to be starting to shift and then really start engaging with the public as well. So you'll start to hear a lot more information in the public on the West Coast. So Tofino Urban Farms is continuing to run the pilot project out there. They have collected over 67 tons to date, and they're going to continue running that composting pilot until we transition into the new facility. And the compost is being treated and they're getting gold star reviews. So that material is going back to the community. So I think that also builds a lot of the slow momentum that we're building towards full diversion. As mentioned in the annual report, we have the Sort and Go brand that we've established. We'll be using that for both West Coast and the Alberni Valley. And we've got the app that works with that. And we're also working really strongly with the Wild Safe coordinators and the Bearware program. So we have, we went out for one, and I'm not sure if this went specifically to the West Coast Committee, but we've already basically acquired the carts and we can now buy them in phases. So phase 1 has been purchased and is getting transported to Port Alberni. Phase 2 is that same purchase. And we have been very explicit in the bear resistance proofing that's going on those carts, which is really, really important on the West Coast. We definitely see it in the Alberni Valley, but more than anything, the West Coast has a lot of wildlife issues, and we want to make sure that we're reducing that conflict, not increasing it. And Surfrider, again, we mentioned they do our education program, and they are just very excited about this and working with us on this component. And we have Zinc Communications continuing to work on the basically the marketing and the beautiful little artwork that's going out as well on this. I don't know if there's any questions.
Oh, Kirsten, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I was just wondering, is there any way that Tokwat can participate somehow? We don't have garbage pickup or anything like that. So how have you thought of how the compostable material could be diverted at Tokwat?
Through the chair, we have met with your staff on site, and we've looked at Makoa specifically, and how is that going to unfold? This is similar to Salmon Beach, also remote community, but concentrated, and how do we manage those communities? We also have the, at least the mainland communities of Taloquiet and Hitatsu, and so we're working sort of each individually, which is outside of sort of our current curbside collection program, which is easy. So we just add the extra stream and do that. With MCOA specifically, we actually have procured bins we bought them as part of the Alberni Valley project. And so we're looking at bins for that, which until we have the facility online, we're going to be using because they have the bear proofing. So we'll be using those just for garbage. And that's going to enhance a lot of the bear safeness of the waste collection system. So that's one of those opportunities. And you have a municipal curbside collection program, and it's remote. So essentially, the most practical way that that's going to unfold is that if the community is on board and you want to move to 3-stream, you can do that, and then it'll be collected and it'll go to the organics processing facility. So the only thing that's actually limiting MCOA and moving forward with organics diversion is just the facility. So once the compost processing facility is up and running, and the community wants to do organics diversion, which I assume they will, then we will have the bins available and we can start implementing that. Similarly, at Salmon Beach, it's a little bit more challenging because they don't have a pickup system in place. So they have more of a transfer station setup. So we're looking at what modifications do we make to the transfer station to allow that. Right now, there is a bit of recycling that we're working on, right? So doing recycling, which we want to enhance. There's garbage collection, and then we would again look at 3-stream for organics. Bamfield is also part of that. So similarly, they have, and it's even more challenging with the west side and east side, how do we get that 3rd stream added? It's not impossible. And sort of like, as we look at the remote communities and we solve these problems, we also have it like 300 little tiny or home size organic containers, which we might utilize as we look at this. So that's sort of our big thing, I think, is to try and get the bulk of the West Coast and the curbside program into the 3-stream, which will be relatively easy. And we're continuing to work with staff to come up with those solutions and seeing what individual solution is going to work best for each community.
Any other questions? Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Jenny, just quickly, the 3-stream collection for the West Coast, and with a tentative time frame of fall 2022, and I do get many questions regarding that potential collection. Well, not potential, it will be. Is that do you think that is an accurate time frame, or how are you internally feeling about that rollout for fall of 2022?
Well, through the chair, we have, because we started the design, and we know that, so it's early spring, we're doing the preliminary design. We'll do as much construction of the composting facility and tipping area upgrades as we can prior to summer, but the majority of the work we want to do in the summertime when it's dry. So we really do anticipate having that done by the end of the summer 2022. And that is the one hard date. And as soon as we have a facility that can accept material, the carts are easy, we have them. The education program, those things are relatively easy. And it does feel like we've been doing well, considering, and if I look back, so how successful have we been? We've had our organics coordinator on for just over a year now, and we really have been able to move forward with getting the Alberni Valley set up with just over a year. And we've made so much of that groundwork is done for the West Coast. I actually do think that I think that's on time. And we're not recording this, right? So no one's gonna, and I really do think that's a realistic goal. So I'm very hopeful.
Thanks for that, Jenny. Yeah, no, great news. I appreciate and understand Kirsten's point there for Toquat as well at MCOA in the village. Yeah, Salmon Beach is, again, another issue, and we've been working on it. We do have bins there, and they're doing some recycling, and it would be really good. We're right in the middle of it as far as wildlife is concerned as well, and bear awareness is some people learn the hard way, but unfortunately, fortunately, I should say, most people are quite well aware of the issues out there. And I know from our perspective, when we leave, we take our garbage with us because we have that recycling out here and out in Arrington through the RDN, and it works well. Once people get on board with organics and other recycling bins, it really, really works well. And we have not had any problems on this side that I'm aware of in our community People say, "Oh, I see a bear or a cougar or whatever it happens to be," but no issues yet. So, yeah, I look forward to it for the West Coast. I think it'll be a really positive step. So, thanks for that. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on. Are you going to deal with it, or Eddie? I see. Oh, there he is. Hi, Eddie. Yeah, please go ahead on the West Coast Transit Service update. Thank you. Sorry, Eddie, you're muted.
How's that? Had to change my microphone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just thought we'd give Jenny a break for a little bit. Wanted to provide an update to the committee on the West Coast Transit Service, and as we work towards a September 22 implementation, where we're at. So BC Transit recently issued an RFI, request for information, that was seeking approaches to maintenance, looking at both in-house and third-party providers. The good news on that is we weren't really sure how many submissions we would get, but we got 5 submissions, so that's a good news item. And the submissions came in from many of the main transit players across the province, so it's a good thing. So we definitely got a good level of technical expertise in that. The biggest issue we continue to face is maintenance of the buses, and what that looks like, and especially as we look towards for implementation, not having a facility for September 22, maintenance will likely have to be third party. So a challenge is finding a third party provider on the West Coast, especially as we look towards the larger buses. So the medium duty buses, which are 30-foot buses or larger, and the heavy duty buses, which are the 40-foot buses. So most submissions for the RFI focused on kind of using a light duty bus, which is a 27-foot model, similar to what is used for custom transit, the Handy Dart type bus, to at least start. As we were looking through it, it kind of became imminent that we'd really need to look at a phased approach to ensure the implementation for September 22. So a phased approach focusing on starting the service using a light duty bus, maintenance being provided through the third party provider. Hopefully we'll be able to find a provider in Ucluelet or Tofino, but we're unsure at this point. BC Transit is going to kind of look back and confirm information they had looked at in June of 2020 and see if that information is still relevant, if there's still not an option here. The flip side to that is if we cannot find a maintenance provider, is providing that third party maintenance based out of Port Alberni for phase 1. So it's not the best answer, it's not ideal, but that's kind of where we're at given the challenges in finding that third party provider. So in phase 2, that's where we'd look to identify land, build a structure of some sort, and that's looking at what size structure we would need to provide the service, and then moving towards the medium or heavy duty bus for that phase. We would be looking at a kind of a cost-effective facility style, so moving away from the typical BC Transit model facility that's used in, say, Cowichan or Abbotsford. We really wouldn't need that here for the West Coast Transit. So any facility would be a cost-effective, and it would support the future rollout of battery electric buses. And then we'd eventually, with phase 2, when that came in, we'd transition the operating company to providing in-house maintenance, as opposed to working through a third-party provider. So I think some next steps we're looking at right now is BC Transit is updating their planning report. We'll have that available to present to the committee at the next meeting in the fall. And then BC Transit is also providing a rundown and overview again of the maintenance options on the West Coast. I think, as we're in a good place for that September 2022 implementation, it's just ironing out a few of the details, especially around maintenance. An RFP, request for proposal, is set to go out this fall, winter, depending on BC Transit's schedule, but it's looking like late fall, the RFP for services will go out. And that is all, and I'm open to questions.
Thanks, Eddie. Any questions? No, Tom, you want to say something? Go ahead, bud.
I know you're shocked. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ed. I appreciate the update. And you answered one of my questions you just answered in terms of, once again, the time framing for that implementation. And I believe it's around September 2022. And you've addressed some of those issues. And it seems you're optimistic that that is a realistic time frame for that implementation. It is very exciting to have transit coming to the West Coast. I can't say it enough. I think Chair Jack pointed out in one of our meetings about the importance of transit in reducing some of the social determinants of health in our area and in general. So I'm very excited about that coming. I do have a question, and I don't know if it's to be able to be answered at this point, and maybe Ms. Fong might be able to. Once again, it goes into the requisitions that will be asked of the region to contribute to that transit service. And I know that there's still a lot of information that needs to come forward before we have an accurate idea of what that might look like. But once again, maybe just for a refresher as to how that apportionment is once again going to be calculated, and if there is room once again for visiting how that those apportionments might be calculated.
For sure, through the chair. So this service establishing bylaw was actually set up with 50% population, 50% land and improvements. So as always, we can revisit it at any time, but it was set up in that model with the two kind of sections in it.
Thank you, Ms. Fong. And then the other part of that was at the time there was a gross estimate as to what that might look like. Would there be any updates onto that, or are you still needing to receive probably a substantial amount of information before that you could have a more accurate estimate of what that might be? It's often a question that I do get asked, and I don't have accurate numbers to bring forward.
For sure. I think Eddie could probably add on to this, but basically we're still going off those estimates that were provided by BC Transit. And then once that RFP process that he was just speaking of and some of those factors are kind of clarified, then they will come back with a revised cost estimate for us at that point.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and to add to that, with the updated planning report that we will be providing your way in the fall, it'll also speak to kind of an update estimate of the net costs. So the costs will change if we're looking to provide maintenance out of Port Alberni. The lease fees will change, and we will probably need an additional bus within the system. So that planning report that comes back will have those updated numbers as well.
Great. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thanks, Eddie. Great report. And yeah, I'm sure that the majority of West Coast communities are looking forward to having that transit service. It's going to be a real boon for the communities out there for sure. Thanks again.
Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to make a recommendation that the West Coast Committee receive the reports A to F. Seconded by Rochelle. Thanks very much. And Kirsten, all those in favor? Great, thank you. I should say I've missed one. Sorry for that. And I see Heather's there waiting to give me a shot. But please go ahead, Heather. Long Beach Emergency Program Agreement between the ACRD and District of Ucluelet.
Great, thank you. So I just provided this report to the West Coast Committee to give an update on a proposed agreement between the Regional District and the District of Ucluelet to continue to provide emergency planning services to the Long Beach electoral area. So I'm sure you're all aware the board approved the Long Beach Emergency Plan in December. This was a long outstanding requirement that now has brought us into compliance with legislation. So now we're looking to explore ways to deliver emergency planning services to the West Coast, but without duplicating services that are offered already. So since 2012, the Regional District and the District of Ucluelet have entered into an agreement for some emergency planning services. However, the agreement from 2012 is very vague and it hasn't been looked at or updated since that time. So we think now is a good time to review that agreement. So I'm working with Rick Geddes at the District of Ucluelet, and we've sort of generally agreed on the things that we want to include in the agreement, and they include allowing electoral area residents to sign up for Ucluelet's emergency notification system, which is Connect Rocket. The district would provide emergency support services to the permanent residents in the electoral area. ACRD would have a seat at the Ucluelet emergency network meetings. I've been attending the last few months, and there's definite value in having an ACRD rep at that meeting to represent the electoral area residents. And then we would also request that the District of Ucluelet provide emergency response to portions of the electoral area. So ACRD would continue to provide emergency preparedness events and resources for the entire electoral area, including Salmon Beach and some of the recreational areas. But we would be more relying on the district to provide emergency response to the populated areas in the electoral area. And so I've just provided this as an update. Rick will be taking a report to the District of Ucluelet Council. And then once we've have an agreement, we'll take it to the board for consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Heather. Any questions from anybody? No? Very good. Appreciate it. Thanks, Heather. Is there any late business? No, not seeing anything. Wendy, nothing? Okay.
No late business, Mr. Chair.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the public that have been participating?
No, we've received no questions or comments from the public respecting the meeting today.
Very good. All right, I think at this point it's, do you want to take a bio break, or is everybody okay to go in camera?
I could use 1 minute for a bio.
All right, let's reconvene at 11:30. How's that? 6 minutes. Thanks very much.
So it seems, Cal, that quite often I'm coming to these meetings from hotel rooms from across the region. I'm on Salt Spring right now, from another hotel room. I'm hopefully less of that in the future.
Well, I guess it goes with the territory, eh?
Yeah, I teach our rescue specialist program as well as my regular
Right.
job. So I'm here
Right
teaching
on.
the Salt Spring lifeboat crew.
There you go. Perfect. Well, I guess everybody's back. I think we're going in camera now, and the motion to close the meeting to the public as per the community charter sections I-91 sub J, information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And section 221(1) CI of FOIPA, the disclosure of which could reasonably be expected to harm significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the negotiation position of the third party. Do I have a seconder on that? Everybody on board?